Hello, Mr. Eric Marterella. How are you? Welcome to the Masters of MEDDICC podcast. It's great to have you on. How are you doing?
Andy, it's Friday, 3 or 4 days before quarter ends. So yeah, I spell with a Y. Good afternoon to you. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome to the show. You and I have had the pleasure of working together in the past at the wonderful and very topical Sprinkler, who, as we'll know, IPO'd this week. I'm not sure when this will go out. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks' time. I can see by the smile on your face, you're very, very happy about that. But maybe for those of you that don't know, those that don't know you, Eric, you could perhaps give a little bit of an introduction about who you are and how you came into this wonderful world of sales.
Well, thanks again for having me. I tend to introduce myself with not a lot of prescription, other than I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a father of 4 beautiful boys. My wife of 20 years, I took to junior prom, and I converted that deal. I would say that's the biggest deal I've closed in sales. But I've been on the ground vocationally working since I was 15 and had the opportunity with a permit to work. And started with Marriott International and had a blast doing it. Just have an extreme appreciation for hospitality, and my heart goes out to everyone still recovering in that sector and industry from the pandemic. But I tend to operate in a way which is working toward vocational focus in corporate for the first 10 years, and then I've been obsessing over helping early stage companies get off the ground, particularly in SaaS. And the coverage that I prefer is market transitional software, typically involving lines of business, collaboration. But I have lots of friends in IT, as I spent many years working in various points of the network. So the most recent 10 years have been intoxicating in that I've been raising a family, learning how to be a better partner to my spouse, and before the pandemic, traveling about 200 days a year for about 10 years. So love travel. And lastly, food. Got to have a great meal every day. At least one great meal every day.
Yeah, I like that. I kind of, yeah, that's a great goal to have. I feel like I'm letting myself down on that one. Maybe that's something I definitely need to get better with, considering how much I, like you, enjoy food. Cool. Thank you for that intro, Eric. That's super, super useful. Well, one thing you touched on there was about the amount of traveling you used to do. Obviously, being I think 3 times chief revenue officer now, and obviously working in global roles as well before that. Obviously, doing a lot of traveling, not just around the US but around the world, I suspect, as well. And with the pandemic and everything that's gone on, I can remember a time when I was still leading a sales team inside of this pandemic, and it occurred to me that our entire pipeline, we hadn't met in person any of those customers. And that for me was a real sort of shock moment. And I remember thinking to myself, if I'd have seen that, 6 months earlier, a year earlier, and I'd told myself that I wouldn't have had the chance to meet any of my prospects, I wouldn't have believed it. And if I had been told it as a fact, I would think that our chances of success would have been hugely diminished. I wouldn't have felt like you could close as successfully. How do you think about that kind of thing? And how have you adapted your teams and your approach to kind of make up for the inability you have of kind of making in-person relationships now?
Yes, great question. In that I'm still trying to figure it out. Being candid, first of all, to address your point, currently I am the GTM Hub at GTM Hub and our Chief Revenue Officer. And I don't know who made that title up, but I just we'll give him an award. I feel as if it's somehow we've tried to make our sales leadership roles bigger and a bigger seat at the table. And I actually tend to operate still in my 3rd run, and I'm better at it now. I wasn't as good in my 1st run, and I think I can thank Andy Monfried, who hopefully is listening to this, for that opportunity when I went to Lodemy. But I've had a blast leading and building teams, and in particular multinational teams, because my curiosity about how we're operating as a team, and especially coming out of the pandemic, is I think going to present the best case studies of what we all thought we were doing really efficiently. And that's working cross-functionally as a team and observing everyone's differences in culture. But I love being on the ground. So when I got off that plane in March of 2020, and it was definitely apparent that I wasn't going to be leaving for a while, I struggled with it. But I will say my adaptive mindset was to start making calls to folks like yourself and reaching out. So many folks have reinforced that, I think, hindsight learning of the special time that we had. And I just looked and knew the day would come today, next week, where I'm going to be able to get back out and move around, because as I built teams, I do obsess over being more efficient and outcome driven and having better strategy in playbooks. But my belief is that a lot of us have the same playbooks, and it comes down to execution, and executing at the field level is what I found to be one of my X factors, meaning I put a heavy weight on the interpersonal skills that you need and the connections you can make when you have a meal or a quick conversation with somebody in a city that may have taken you 12 hours to get to, but the ROI was met when you got off the plane and you were able to shake a hand, give a hug, and meet somebody in their backyard, and specifically learn with the physical and we'll say the editorial, the conversations you have on the Uber ride over or the drive back to the airport have often given me the best insights to make decisions.
Yeah, I agree. This is a very interesting topic to me. And this is something I was talking to a previous guest on the show, Thibaut Sarel, from formerly at Snowflake, the GM, and set up a EMEA for them there. And we talked a bit about this, and what I think you're talking about there, we kind of defined as trust, because it's such an important element in interpersonal relationships, as you mentioned there. And I think it's such an I think an undervalued or underappreciated element in relationships is trust. We don't talk about it enough. I think we all know it needs to exist, but we don't talk about it enough. And I think it goes both for customer relationships and peer and colleague relationships as well. Just something that just, it just strikes me that we don't mention it enough.
Well, I think we mentioned it a lot in the last year and a half, and it was very apparent if we're just going to pick on one of my favorite channels to digitally engage on and support one another, and that's LinkedIn. So encourage anyone listening, please link in. I often say, if I can connect you to somebody in my network, I will, if it makes sense. But I saw a lot of folks over rotating on this topic of wanting to be human and wanting to appear to be trustworthy. And I believe you can see it very clearly in the authenticity of the prose, the content, what the focus of the conversation is when you are forced to do it in several characters. In the case of LinkedIn, you have plenty of opportunity to even use video. But it was very apparent that this was going to be a popular thing to talk about. And Andy, I felt a bit of an aversion of contributing to the conversation. And why is because I think folks will know often when you meet them if they're sincere, and no matter how you invest in that, you will often fail if it's not felt. So I've had this give and take with contributing in a way back to the community. I love to absorb. I'm more of a voyeur as it relates to social. Of course, we had some time together at Sprinkler, and I spent probably 7 years, and I'm fascinated about how that industry is evolving and changing as it relates to what's possible for the journey and the experience. But I'm more obsessing these days over learning how to be more outcome focused and effective versus just productive and trying to contribute to the machine, because that's the popular thing to do.
Yeah, and I think what you're reflecting on there is your self-awareness of how you're coming across in those situations. And I think what comes back is, whether consciously or subconsciously, people that are self-aware with high EQ tend to be very, very conscious of how they're contributing towards the conversation, and whether it's, whether they're giving value back or not. And I almost think like, credibility comes into play as well. And, if you're always just chipping in, then people will become aware of that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's almost like the person that rarely speaks, and when they do speak, you tend to kind of sit up and take notice a little bit more. I think there's something that comes into play there as well. So kind of having that thing to say, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't seen Emart post for a while, and here he is, he's saying something. I'm going to really make sure I read this. And I think there's something in that as well. So Here's the thing. I was looking, obviously we mentioned you're now CRO at GTM Hub, and I was looking and I noticed that, you know, there's a serious amount of talent that I know of that's gone there. And I know of it because I remember these folks as being the talent we got to work with at Sprinkler. And so now there's, you know, a number of our former colleagues and now still your colleagues over with you at GTM Hub, people that, you know, I know are like, you know, some of the best people I've worked at in their chosen roles, their chosen professions and areas of expertise. How is it, do you think, that those people that, you know, A players are gravitating together like that? How does that happen? Because that's something that a lot of people try to replicate, but it's very, very, very rarely you see it, certainly with the amount of people that you've got with you over at GTM Hub.
Well, it's pretty decisive when I onboard. Best team wins, and you know, you want to be in a position where you can call somebody in that A+ category and have the believability index to bring them in. I've been on some missions that I've had some pause in doing that, and in this role, not even before I joined did I have one shed of doubt that this was bigger than the S word. It's bigger than the S word, and it has all the risk that the S word had for me when I left a very strongly positioned role at Cisco, managing a very large relationship, Amazon and Marriott, and took a shot and believed in an entrepreneur and the growing opportunity as it related to the addressable market, but more importantly, in vibing with what the mission was. So it's very kin to that. And, you know, I believe in early stage building, you have to get some of the band back together, and oftentimes it doesn't work. In this case, I've taken a run at some of the folks that I've always wanted to work with again, and I've been successful about half the time. So I'm not ever batting 100%. And I think as I close the dawn of doing early stage, it might go into a little later stage. If I'm batting 500, at least the North American Sports Reference, you're typically in the Hall of Fame as a baseball player. But this has been an easy conversation to have. And I will go back to the other point of having an understanding in self-awareness from being a sales leader. I cannot produce the results and put smiles on my client's face if the product isn't amazing. And I can't give them any amount of discount or easy and great experience in a process that will be appreciated if they don't drive results and metrics. So I obsess over that. So when I'm recruiting and building teams, I'm trying to understand what they want out of the journey. And it may, in some cases, take 5 to 10 years to get there. But my believability index is very high because I spent a lot of time with the CEO. And I will also share that I purchased this software and went through the entire buying journey without having any preference, not even a call for a retained recruiting opportunity to join this company. And so selecting the software for a client I was advising for, seeing the impact, the results, understanding where we were needing to improve, and then spending the several hours with the CEO and also vested folks in the review process, including the VCs, I couldn't say no. So most folks haven't been able to say no when I call them, but I'm also cognizantly aware that it is, you can never force somebody to do anything, and I never aim to do that, but it is called recruiting,
right?
Not just interviewing and onboarding. So I'm pretty aggressive as I am in my selling pursuits when I'm doing that.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things you were talking about there was the, you know, you were sort of alluding to the sort of overall life cycle of a deal and a customer and that sort of thing, and how important it is to obviously have the good product to back up the good go-to-market. And actually, the go-to-market is an interesting one for me, not only because go-to-market is an acronym of the same name as your company, which is confusing for me, and I'm sure you probably get a lot of good inbound that way, actually, but because you have, for me, one of the greatest, not the greatest SaaS marketers that I've ever seen, that I've ever been sort of a part of a team with, in Jeremy Epstein. So he for me is
Oh, no,
a
no, no. We call him Jerbear, Andy.
Yeah, I knew that, but I always get it wrong, so I didn't want to say. So I'm glad you corrected me.
He actually calls himself Yuri Bear, and he does not want to be confused with the other Jeremy I've said. So yeah,
Yeah,
he's probably was one of the reasons, but not the reason. In fact, I independently went through the review process without even speaking to him,
yeah.
because I've often seen people make mistakes
Mhm.
when they follow leaders or they follow folks that once they built something great with, and it didn't work out well. So I was very cognizant of that coming into it, because I'd learned that lesson before.
Yeah,
But without question, one of the top community marketers on the planet, and a great friend of mine, and someone I always enjoy fighting, and all the struggles that go into sales and marketing. So I think that's probably an interesting intersection of our conversation of how that actually works. Because
yeah.
happy to espouse if you have a question to tee it up. Otherwise, I'll just give you a story or two, and I will try not to focus on my good friend too much as I explain these. Maybe we can't protect his anonymity anymore, but
I would love to hear more. I was actually going to try and direct the conversation that way, because
yeah.
it's, for me, marketing is such an important part of our success in I know it's part of the revenue team, but really, that top of funnel, and driving the traction through the funnel is a big part as well. So I'd love to hear more.
Well, there's this big push and pull. I mean, the Horowitz book, Hard Things About Hard Things, says I should be fighting more with the product and engineering team. And Rado and Jordan here, and Ivan are all co-founders. They're all product and engineers, and it's probably not a good adage to follow, to fight with the folks that are innovating to the future, especially when one of them is your boss. But I have no problem with the conflict, and I think there's beauty in the conflict. In fact, there is a lot of things that you should establish day one, especially in early stage, that are the rules. There is a lot of operating rhythm that you impart when you go from an inbound to an outbound motion, which is one of the things I was doing. And consequently, marketing has to change. And it's 2021. So I'll only share a quick story about one of our first encounters. So Jared came over here and sat in this very small space, and we had a reckoning within the first half hour, which was the things that we've done before, and building out to a double unicorn and all the other accolades, et cetera, that boys doesn't mean anything. And we have to look forward and recognize it's 2020, and we have to embrace new process, new technology, new ways of working, and most importantly, observing the new opportunity in talent acquisition. So we have built a team together very differently than we ever have. Now, credit to him in that he will be very innovative always in terms of where talent is located. So we have folks in 9 countries on his team. And so he builds a bit different in a great way, because through that, you get diversity of thought, alignment to cultural views, and customer POVs. But we've taken a very hard run at this and are building in a unique way, unlike I've ever done before. And my lean towards technology is that I'm fascinated by companies like 6th Sense and other opportunities. And when you federate it as an architecture, my belief is that for the first time, I'm seeing sales and marketing ad nauseum come to the table and truly create a sales enablement, but thinking about it also inclusive of marketing. And it's not easy, and you will fight. But when you fight through it and you do the hard things and you plan it out and you execute, my belief is you're going to see a much better process. And most importantly, if I think about my customers beyond the ones that are our customers, our sales leaders, our sales team, they're happier. They're more efficient in what they do, and they are better knowledge workers when it comes to executing the goals. Right. You've set them up for success.
Yes, indeed. One of the things that I always found was really strong about the way that Jared would do marketing when we were at Sprinkler was that he was fantastic at fueling and giving you kind of both the collateral and the kind of the backing to build champions inside of your deals, inside of your customers. And you touched on it a little bit with that community piece. what do you think? Why do you think he's so effective at that? What do you think it is that he kind of focuses on to get those goals?
I believe we're both sharing the mindset, and you wrote a book about it, and calling to the champion, just one particular chapter that's one of my favorites, especially at quarter end, as we talk about testing your champions and creating opportunities for the next play. But, a champion is really an advocate of the brand, and they will, as a proficient enterprise seller, and anyone listening has had one or two customers know what I mean. When you're badged at a corporate headquarters, if you were to be let in today, and you are interchangeable with the team, then it's natural, and you will be more effective from all of the things that you're aiming to do in terms of your execution of plan. And so when Jared and I spend the time and energy creating an ecosystem of advocates and champions of our brand, they may not be part actually of our commercial business at all. In fact, that's, I think, in some ways, some of the magic, which is hard to prescribe, and is probably a book that he could write. But it's something that I have a particular passion point around, because as I've gotten a bit older in this, and we go back 25 minutes to that topic of what being trustworthy, authentic is, it's not so forced when you have great relationships. And folks don't necessarily see, whether it be digital or a physical event, a pane of glass of people that are basically advocating for your brand because it's contrived and they should. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we risk in that losing some of our potential people to be mouthpieces and shout from the rafters. And I'm not being in terms of the analyst coverage saying that that's not a different motion. That is. And you spend good money to have that type of voice and quadrant placement. But when you build an authentic community, it sort of like an alliance channel firing on all cylinders, it sort of sells itself. And you can only hope to make it more efficient in the example of a sales leader by having really disciplined operating rhythm and process in place, like MEDDICC.
Right, like MEDDICC. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I like that. Like you talked on the partner ecosystem there, the alliances. How obviously at GTM Hub, that's pretty big for you guys, right? Because you're working in such a space that is so sort of business led, and almost sort of consulting in a lot of ways, consulting led. How do you folks, how are you guys building the alliance business there? How important is it to you? How do you kind of work with your partners in enterprise sales?
Well, I've been a raving fan of this, and I can credit John Chambers and the team, Carlos Dominguez, who is one of my great friends and mentors, who sort of taught me this, and I learned it before I met them. And John is more of a level 5. We're not on hey, how's it going, John? Hey, Eric. Had I stayed at Sprinkler, perhaps. But he is level 5, and I would say define those level 5 leaders. It's just a quick public service announcement, because I have many. But the net is, I've never achieved any great amount of success in a sales function, whether I be an individual contributor or leader, without a partner ecosystem. A great product, okay, solution consultants, solutions engineers, Dan Woodward, John Toomey, Philippe Bukaka, Drew DeJaffois. I'm naming them because Rachel Waters from Cisco. I mean, when I've exited those journeys, in the case of Rachel, I think we were tearful because they drive so much of the process for you because of the teaming aspect of their proficiency. Now back to partners. If you could look at Cisco as an example and have 99% of your revenue attained through an indirect channel, I believe that's what great looks like. You take the operating costs down. You have a better experience as it relates to coverage, potentially some disciplines that you just could never build and scale, especially in an early stage. And lastly, when I say experience matters, what I want is our customers and prospects to be served in the life cycle. And while I may have our customer success team, alongside the ride, there are certain things that we just won't address. And so partners fill that hole, and they create a much stickier relationship by virtue that they're experts in what they do. And with GTM Hub, we are in early days, we'll say across the planet, of folks adopting a mindset of becoming less industrial economy focused and productivity oriented focus, and more about our knowledge economy and outcomes and how we measure effectiveness and what I shouldn't be doing when I wake up. What mission matters? You have them up too.
I do, yes.
And I'll make a closing point on that the technology part's pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
The change management, the behaviors that have to shift inside a business, that's the tough stuff. And so fortunately, I've always had great relationships with partners who have helped me, we'll say, cross the chasm when it hasn't been about the technology, SaaS or widget that I've been providing, but more about all the preparation and continued refinement to how they actually execute.
That is an interesting topic as well in itself, as much as I think there's a real big divide in enterprise sales that doesn't, I don't think, get defined enough or as regular as it should be, which is that there's a real big difference between having a category creating product and proposition compared to being like the 2.0 of something that already exists, or the 3.0 if you're talking about things like email marketing and that sort of thing. And I think that there's a real difference there in how you approach the opportunity and how you kind of engage with the customer, and the kind of the tactics from everything from your go to market to your in person, the things you're focusing on to try and differentiate. And with a proposition like you have at GTM Hub, which is, for those that don't know, and you probably hate me for the way I articulate this, but it's software to help organizations enable OKRs. Is that, how would you describe it? How would you define?
I was going to offer you a marketing role. Simple is a better way to describe it, which you just did. And the fact that just to give you a frame of reference, it was okay what for me, prior to me looking at GTM Hub as a potential solution, what the problem statement was, or before was, for our command and message fans out there, is most organizations, whether they be a Fortune 500 that's 50 plus years old, or just an A series company that is getting started with 15, 20 people, all obsess over the same things, right? It's going faster. It's creating effectiveness through measuring what matters. A book was written on it. Google was cited as one of the early adopters. But the before statement today is when you do all that in a spreadsheet and you have an opportunity to meet with a team, you're not necessarily going to get the lift after the meeting. Meaning, to quote actually Raji Thomas, after our first kickoff on a weekend in 2012, came up to me and put his arms on my shoulders and he goes, "Make sure this wasn't a movie." And I've used that before and again, but I knew what he meant. He was saying, I don't care what was on that whiteboard, but I care about it. But most importantly, make sure it sticks. Make sure that we follow through on what we just Stratton planned around with Mike Logan and that early stage team. And that was a very riveting moment for me. And I understood what he meant, similar to a sales rep getting off a call and forgetting to put in the notes and informing the cross-functional team members of what our next steps are. Like that, those are those moments of truth where that data leakage is a big challenge. So working with the opportunity to work with an early stage or late stage company and helping them with software come together to drive focus and alignment, transparency, have it be dynamic, because it's not about OKR, or it's the framework and how we orchestrate. But this is a results orchestration that is fed by the data and the inputs. So we're just getting started, and a lot of folks are spending time with us because they have been doing this as a spreadsheet. They've been using Ghost, SMART goals, VSCM, but they're starting to understand that it's not about necessarily just the company top line goals that everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see what everyone else is doing But most importantly, if you could help contribute to somebody else's KRs for a particular quarter when they have an OKR set, and be able to have that visibility, but also functionally go in and do something to help improve that metric, it just is what great looks like for me. And as we go through the journey with customers, we're seeing marked differentiation of crawl, walk, run, of folks wanting to take 20 integrations in day one, and some just wanting to get out of a spreadsheet and in a system of record together, so they can see each other's focus, transparent alignment. And lastly, good use case. One of my clients every week was running a call with the C-suite where it was just 10 PowerPoint slides provided and collated into one, and they just read the news to each other. And that way of working still works, but what if the meeting ended and you could still be in a transparent way of looking and keep that conversation going, so it wasn't a movie between Monday and the next Monday call? That's what we do.
Right. I like that. And I've been in that position where I've been working on my, the updated OKR slides in PowerPoint, and, we weren't even using Google Slides. So you'd have like the latest version, and someone would work on one late version, and then you'd be, hang on a minute, I'm working on it. And then, oh my God, you're merging slides together, nightmare. So that's a million miles away from the utopia state that you're talking about.
It is. And I will say, from an ICP, any of my brothers and sisters listening, I'm not necessarily calling chief revenue officers, but I will say they are great champions and often coaches. Haven't found a saboteur yet, because they obsess over understanding what's going on in marketing, what's going on in engineering, how is finance performing, because it impacts, if you're on a P&L like myself, your decision making. And the ability to just do a self-service is an interesting attribute of what we do. And I just want to bring it up as a point of not contention, but an early day situation that I was looking at. Now, we've had a run together, and we had a competitor that had a self-service model. So I perceive it as a flywheel, and I actually perceive it as a big benefit to our business, because our business is fueled by our customers. And if you have a prospect that can go in and download or log in for a free trial and experience the software, okay, they're not going to have the experience they'd have with a SE and a sales process in motion, but it doesn't matter. Can they use it? Do they see value? Do they talk to one of their chief of staff and say, hey, I think I could solve your problem? So that was actually the company was actually, the genesis of it was a data company. This is a data play, but it also evolved into a self-service platform. So we offer both, and we believe growth can be achieved through ubiquity. And so I am agnostic. I want folks to leverage this platform. I'm passionate about them evolving the way that they work. If they're a solopreneur, or they have 15,000 people in a division that they manage. But it has to be simple. It has to be easy. And I guess I'm up for that. Difficult stuff still, because I wouldn't be in a transitional software space. But what I'm not up for is complicated.
So. Well, you touch on something there that I'm very, very interested in, which is product-led growth, where you've got your self-serve model, as you call it there, where you've got obviously inbound people I imagine from all sizes of company. Because I think traditionally when we talk about self-serve, you get it gets sort of badged as being small, medium-sized businesses, companies you've never heard of, right? But actually, in the modern self-serve model, you can have someone from a car manufacturer pop up as, and like you say, using it in their internal team. I know that, with the aim to roll it out further. And I think if you look at some of the greatest software companies of the moment, of where we are right now, companies like Slack, companies like Notion, companies like Airtable, these companies are all doing that self-serve model. And, I'm sure maybe not Slack, that's more matured, but some of those companies like Airtable, like Notion, like Miro, like Figma, I'm sure that they're probably being used inside of your organization, and they would have probably 95% of the time started self-serve. But, as they kind of proliferate around the organization, then you start to sort of see them sort of rise up. And that for me is really exciting, because it's a whole new channel of sales. It's really, all the signs have been there for so long about, customers doing, all those data points around customers come to you and they're 70% informed about the decision, and they're really just trying to get the final 30%. Well, in a lot of cases now, they're way more than 70%. Really, they're actually made their decision. They're coming over to you, and it's now your job as a revenue team to try and sort of, well, first and foremost, it's your job as a product team to deliver the experience where they want to stay and they want to use the product. But then once they start to use it, then, those must be, I imagine I can sort of see a situation where there's almost like a little, like you'd have it. I can imagine if you had, if we're in person and you're at your office, I can imagine you having like a bell rigged up, like an alarm rigged up. If X email address from this top 100 list signs up self-serve, like, wow, let's go. Let's get in the war room. We're gonna, how can we make this customer successful? And do you see much of that? Do you see much of the, the self-serve people coming in bound that way? And then what do you do? How are you approaching it?
Well, we approach them the way they want to be approached, in that the sense of, if somebody at a university, as an example, is a customer at GTM Hub, because it will help them in the sense, if I think of other reasons I've done this role, it's actually very personal, in the sense that I have had coaching from mentors that have observed how I built and executed, and receive feedback that I need to be more focused in line of sight on strat and plan. Like, what's the plan on paper? Excuse me. It's like the hardest thing sometimes to do is you're just flying this plane, raising money, adopting to a new team, culturally aligning, and how does that change from an A to a D round? I know at every stage felt like, and I've done a couple since that have been late, but also A to B. And it's just different, right? But if I could be better, if I could work on myself, it was to be more disciplined in this way. So when somebody is taking the time and energy to work with our software in a self-serve way, we're actually very self-aware and allow them to do it. Now, we of course leverage technology and have the ability with a lot of different ways that it federates back to CRM to pay attention. But we have a very decisive approach around allowing them to explore and truly reach their own impasse. Because there are people that are using our software that are in philanthropic areas. I mean, we just closed a deal with the United Way. We actually give our software away to any nonprofits, any great cause, working with a good friend to do a segment around how our software has helped advance cures. This is not a GTM Hub commercial. I mean, these are things of which I've been doing this for a long time. And it's really important for me to be working with a software that could potentially change the way, as Cisco said it, lives, works, and plays. I'm back in that seat again. And, it's not easy as a sales leader to have, you get the feedback loop from your team. They don't want to be competing against a self-service model, but I heard that same team in 2007 as I was supporting Amazon, in particular, the AWS team. That's how that company started. In fact, they didn't even write a contract, at least that I was aware of, until 2009. And so folks were using their Amex. So look no further than, okay, yes, Andy Jassy and Bezos, who were, striving to create modules that folks could just vend. Brilliant, right? Like a lot of efficiencies in that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So changing gear a little bit, actually, one of the things I was really fascinated to dig into a little bit was, you went, I tell this story, I always think about how I first met you, and I was onboarding in New York for Sprinkler at what they would call Splash. I'm sure they still do call it Splash. I'm sure there's probably a few more people there than I was there, but I was thinking about this actually. This is just an interesting point. The amount of people from my Splash that are still at Sprinkler is quite remarkable. That's sort of 6-7 years ago, I think. So that's kudos to Sprinkler there for retaining those people, because they are hugely talented people in that case. So that's really interesting and remarkable to me. But you came in, and I can't remember what the topic was, but I remember how you were introduced, which was they were talking about how long and hard they were trying to lure you over to Sprinkler. And so you came into Sprinkler, had a great great tenure there. How many years were you at Sprinkler?
5.
5 years. 5 years at Sprinkler, incredible. And then obviously stepping, in the global VP sales role, and then stepping out into Lotami as chief revenue officer there, and then a number of other roles since then to where you are now. So a lot of sales leadership experience in different organizations. How much? This is a question I always like to dig into. How much does your playbook differ based on the product you're selling, the proposition, the sector you're selling to, all that kind of stuff? Does it differ a lot? Is it mostly the same? That's always a super interesting question I love to hear about.
It's always different because
Okay.
I learn from every one of those runs and journeys, and I will be self-effacing and say, and Andy, this was one of the first conversations we had as I aimed in that role at Lotami to really put the discipline and operating rhythm that was at the time lacking. Mm-hmm. And that was sales qualification. So mm-hmm. I have some core tenets that I'm unwavering from. I think John Kaplan said it best, and maybe it was Brian Walsh in one of the trainings we did when we were going through command and message, maybe the 4th time at Sprinkler. But the point was like, you can do a lot of other things here, right? But you can't not do these 3, right? So if you don't want to, you're just not on my team, and that's okay. And I think it was Brian Walsh. Big fan of him. Great trainer, brilliant mind. Lots of good Xerox references too. I think we can learn a whole lot from those playbooks. Back to your question, from those early 80s men and women that were driving around in the K car, pulling the Xerox out and demoing, right? So it's activity driven, of course. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, value framework and how you have a conversation, because when I buy software, and I bought 9 different sales tech stacks so far, I want it to be a great experience, and I want it to be about me. Let's be selfish for a moment, like my pain. Yeah. So there are things in which I am just wedded to because I haven't seen something better. Mm-hmm. But every day I'm open to a better way to delight a customer, or move a sales stage quicker through the funnel, or just honestly have an employee feel like they're contributing beyond just a decimal point. Right. That's super important to me, because the vocational path, why we make that choice to go from individual contributor, where you have things forced upon you, is still like right in my frontal lobe. Mm-hmm. And I've had some really great sales leaders, and I've had some really bad ones. Mm-hmm. And the bad ones I can only characterize lacked 52 minutes back self-awareness of what was too much. Yeah. So I'm constantly on that edge of trying to test my self-awareness, because we all think we're self-aware and 98% of us aren't. Yeah. Just another fact, I think my wife brought that to, the last Friday night's glass of wine, as I was feeling very confident. But my point is, be very cognizant of what's too much, especially at early stage. So adapting to where you need to be can't be more pointed of what I want to say as it relates to just even coming into this journey. Yeah, I'm meeting smart people, in some case much smarter than me. So I have to be cognizantly aware that I can't put everything out. And playbooks, it just comes down to execution. I think everybody has. Yeah. I hope my competitors are listening, and by the competitors, welcome in the result orchestration space. We want a really crowded quadrant. We're just going to be in the top right if you're okay with it. But I think we all have the same playbook, and we all read the books. But I believe, in the sense, bringing back the gift that you've given us in your words and study, giving practical examples are what I obsessively learned. I don't need any more philosophy. I've got enough.
Practical examples are a really fascinating one for me, because I recently learned this more about myself and trying to discover more about how my own brain works. And I'm actually pretty sure that if I was actually located in the US, that I'd have been diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. I never got the diagnosis, but I would bet 99% sure that I have that. And it comes back to how I digest information, and and by contrast, how I will not digest information. Things will go completely over my head unless they have that metaphor, unless they have that analogy, unless they have that creative way of describing how it comes across. And I think that's where examples come in so much. And I think maybe perhaps an overlooked element of experience is not just having the experience to know, that of all that flow chart of if this, then that, then, how to act with it. But it's the, if this, by the way, follow me on this path, because I've got an anecdote here that's going to explain to you and make you understand why, if this, then that. And then now if we're here, here's the next example from my experience. And so I think that's something that's so often missed when people talk about these things. And so that's a super interesting one. One final question.
I just want to interject that I've not met anyone proficient at sales that hasn't had what is clinical, and I have no problem admitting that I've not diagnosed either, but a bit of ADHD.
Yeah.
And I think that seller's deficit disorder has been brought up, and I don't think it's branded by some of our friends that taught us it, but I think it actually is one of the more brilliant things about you, Andy. So the fact that you focused and wrote a book, to me, I'm not a doctor, but would say even if you had tenets of ADHD, it actually is probably helped you more than it's ever held you back, because of your strong grit and fight in the discipline you imparted to actually take the time to even orchestrate something like this conversation. It's pretty easy, right? But it takes energy and effort and discipline to actually do it. And that's I think what you struggle with at times in the field or as a sales leader. What you could occupy 24 hours of a day because there's an excess of opportunity.
There is. And
if you get out there, you'll see it. If you stay inside and you hit refresh in Salesforce at the end of the quarter, you're not doing your job.
Not doing your job. That's a good point. Excess of opportunity, and maybe a good way to kind of wrap things up with my favorite final question, which is excess of opportunity is one thing. So especially where you've got, so many brilliant propositions today, by the time people like yourself get involved, it has to be a good proposition, right? So your team is going to always have a compelling proposition that customers should listen to. So how do you qualify that the time is being spent in the right places and keep your team focused on outcome driven and sort of progressive sales opportunities, not ones where they're just happy to continue talking about stuff, but actually where we can tangibly move deals forward? What sort of tools, I guess, or parts of your playbook cover that?
Yeah. You keep wanting to dig into my playbook. I can't give the secret sauce away. No, look, it's the discipline that in the sense of every great sales leader listening, and it took me a while to learn this and be actually pretty proficient at it myself, is that when you're spending time and energy with your teams and one-on-ones or your frontline leadership discussions, that you've done your homework and you have the ability, of course, with technology to get things to advance and leverage qualification methodologies, which you wrote on with MEDDICC or MEDDICC or EC Mart. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Got another one. I got a sequel book for you. But my point is that the ability to have also, yes, I'm going to say GTM Hub helps me identify what is important and what isn't, because my team leverages GTM Hub to set their own KRs, and they are beyond the metrics that you can already see in Salesforce. So my closing point on that is, when you're bringing folks together, if you are just having them read the news or you've done nothing in the way of preparation, my permission is, you as a seller or my team, bi-directional, is you end the call. And we've had some abrupt endings since I've had this kind of motion. We just end the call, and it's because it's disrespectful. And if you think of the opportunity to really show at the onset how you're going to be helping someone be more productive in a role, or efficient rather, you need to first start with respecting the individual. This is not a hierarchical servant. Servant leadership, the people that put it that are charlatans at it, go have that call and then have a QBR and sit there with their arms crossed and have done nothing in the way of doing the pre-work. And that to me it's offensive. And I've made the mistake, by the way, several times. So the only reason I get a little bit triggered is because I it's something that as a seller bothered me the most. And when I've made the mistake, I know it's held us back. But beyond that, there's lots of tech that can create signals of being more productive, one of which is GTM Hub.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you very much. I think we've just about used up all our time we have allocated for this, which is a shame, because I feel like we could go on and talk for hours about this stuff and really dig in deep. But where can, you mentioned earlier, people to reach out and connect? LinkedIn, is that the best place to find you?
It's the best channel for sure. I welcome you to do that, and I will of course broker introductions. But Andy, thank you for having me on. It's a bit cathartic to have a great host like yourself just ask a few questions. I always learn things as I go through this, but I'm continuing to learn through you, and I encourage everybody that's spend some time reading the book or actually listening weekly to your updates and your podcast release to keep doing so, because it's better on 2x speed. I'm not gonna lie, I probably sound better at 3, but it's become a bit of a habit, and I've really been intrigued by some of the guests and the candor that you bring to the conversation by your line of questions. So hopefully it lands in a top 10, but I didn't enter this conversation trying to do anything other than get to know you and hopefully this audience a little better.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been super, super good. And thank you for that kind words. That goes up there. I've got my little sound bites of, like, if I'm having a bad day, that's going on the playlist. As I caught John McMahon saying that I was the MEDDICC guy, which is quite funny. So I've got that. That's at the top of the list. And
I bet you can't play John on 3x speed. You wouldn't want to try anyway, but
no. No.
I can't believe we went a whole hour and didn't reference John McMahon, but I actually will close with it and say that guy profoundly changed my life in many ways, and not because we were on the phone a whole lot, but he taught me a lot of things around another we'll call it segment that we could talk on, and that would be recruiting. And then also when you make that decision to voluntarily leave a post of which you had a whole lot of sentimental reasons to stay, but maybe not a lot of business reasons. He was the one guy that actually coached me through that change management in my head. And so for that, we'll say yes, John McMahon, thank you for your support.
Yeah, indeed. And the guy has, as I think probably everyone listened to this, but if you've been living under a rock, he's got a book out, The Qualified Sales Leader. It is a tremendous. Every single person I've spoke to, a lot of people with books, especially sales books, they say, yeah, I've got that one. With John's book, everyone I speak to says, yeah, I got that, I read it. And there's something about the story, it brings you in, the way it's written. I can't speak highly enough about it. So yeah, for sure. If for anyone that's listening hasn't picked up his book, anyone's wondering, who are all these people who are in the John McMahon mafia of CROs out there? Yeah, there's no other sales leader like it. So yeah, what a way to finish. Thanks very much, Eric.
Quite welcome, Andy. All the best, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you, sir.